Hey everybody, we're going to continue our exploration into Xray. Today we're covering Xray Enterprise Essentials for Data Center. This should have some slight variance from the cloud version we did previously to this. I don't even know why we're doing Data Center, honestly, because it's going away soon. And so it's still here though, and most people are still using it. So here we are. This is part of our certification for Xray Enterprise. We already got our certification for Xray, but now we got to do Xray Enterprise, which is a separate add-on, and Xray does require you to get both regular Xray and Xray Enterprise if you want to have all the bells and whistles. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and let's jump in. All right, let's start the course. Try to stay awake for this. Oh boy, it's that afternoon tiredness. Welcome, everybody. Feel free to use the chat here to say hello, and we're gonna try to power through all this stuff. So, training goals, understanding. So a lot of this should be a lot of the same. We're gonna see how much I can remember from Friday. The test case designer, the TCD, and the versions and the dynamic test plans, I feel like are gonna be all good. It's these cross-project reports that are standing out as being something slightly different. All right, so Xray Enterprise is the next level. Yep, so we read through this last time. It works smarter with optimized tests that ensure optimal coverage, trigger automation directly within Xray with the click of a button, allowing non-technical users can get in the game and have enterprise support. So let's see, we are gonna, yep, so I think, these are basically exactly the same thing. So I'm not seeing anything special here. This slide is different though. Xray Enterprise is currently available for Jira Data Center. Xray Enterprise requires an active core license, version 6.3.0 or higher. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you must purchase both Xray and Xray Enterprise. Test case designer includes a 10 edit access seats. So you have 10 folks that can create or use test case designer. All right, so far, a lot of the same from the cloud one. I don't know why Xray would make us go through these twice. So let's go over the theory. Maybe the second time's a charm, folks. Maybe once we go through this 2 times, we'll finally figure out what this TCD is and how to actually make good test cases. But the biggest problem that we have is you don't want to test everything once, and you don't want to test everything because that balancing game is just not going to get you anywhere. And it's a very dangerous place to be, because if you don't test everything, then bad things will happen. And if you test everything only once, bad things will also happen. But if you test everything, then you're never launching. You're never going to get the product out the window or out the door, because you're testing everything, and everything changes so often. And especially in the age of AI, like how you test everything, like and all the AI slop that's coming out, like it is super important now more than ever that you have a really good testing plan. And again, we can't do both, so you kind of have to compromise in the middle. And this is kind of where Xray comes in. And so the reason we can't test everything, and this is kind of just some mathematics, right? There's just 19,000 possibilities. We only had 3 values. But most enterprise applications have like hundreds and hundreds of values. So you can see that the problem just gets exponentially worse. And so because we can't test for everything, we have to kind of find some middle ground. And you can't test in isolation either. I've been burned by this before, where you try to test something, right? You test like a subsystem, and it might pass, but the moment you combine things together, you have to get 2 systems to talk to each other. It's just horrible. So enter this combinatorial test design. It's a black box test technique in which test cases are designed to exercise specific combinations of values of several parameters. I don't know if this is an Xray exclusive thing. It kind of feels like it is, but it's what we're going to be learning. And we want to use it because it's going to help us find more bugs. It's going to be more thorough, and it's going to require less design time to make your test cases. And folks, again, if you're watching this does look and feel a lot like the cloud one that we did. So thank you all for being here and bearing with me as we go through this a second time. So the test case designer is a combinatorial test design optimization tool that allows users to quickly generate tests from a model of variation ideas of their application or process. It's used to generate tests that will maximize critical interaction coverage as in a mathematically few scenarios as possible. So it's going to let you hit 100% requirement coverage with fewer tests, and it's just a sweet spot. And so there's a lot that goes into this, but essentially we're going to find like different variables, right? Different permutations of different possibilities. And then the Xray is going to design like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of something else to kind of give you like, okay, if you test these things, then we're going to maximize the chances that we're going to cover the majority of the cases. I don't think it'll cover edge cases. I think edge cases you're still on the hook for, but it does a better job at like not overloading or overwhelming your testers. When using the Xray Test Case Designer, it all starts with your test model. And you can copy assets from the sample test models project to help you get started. And then one of the first things that we wanted is we wanted to define a parameter. So the parameters are ideas or factors to be tested. You can consider them to be the steps in the flow that you define as the model scope. Parameters often refer to the UI input variables, but they can also represent environment, device configs, API requests, responses, and so on. Not all flow parameters are relevant in a given test model. Then we have values. So the values are different ways in which the parameter can vary. So this is where like the devil's in the details. Oh, thank you so much, La Petty. Some examples of values for booking flight can be like the type of class that you're in, the Chrome, like the type of browser that you have, and then like the user type, folks with the license, no license, membership, and so on. Then we added some rules because you want to apply some rules, right? You might define which parameters or values should never be tested together, or which values should be tested together. Then we set up a scenario, which is going to be very similar to a data table if you've ever used Xray, where we're just going to give all the information so that you can go ahead and do it. And then scripts. While scenarios focus on data that will be used for our test, scripts provide the actual context so the testers or automation frameworks know how, where to use the data. More specifically, scripts provide the ability to define actions and expected results in a data-driven template manner. And scripts can be geared towards their either manual or automated test execution. How embarrassing would it be if I failed today's test because I took it? I'm telling you, this is basically everything we covered on Friday with our cloud one. So first, you're going to want to create your account. So you're going to, again, and I kind of call this one out. I had a suspicion on Friday because this is Jira Data Center, not Jira Cloud, and they were using the exact same thing. So either Xray made a boo-boo or they just want you to do it twice. I'm not quite sure why I have both of them like this. But anyway, so you're going to log in and you're going to go create a new test model. And then this is the application that we're going to be using for our pseudo testing. Like we're some sort of a airline application. And we're going to basically walk through all this where we're going to define parameters, specify the rules, generate the optimized scenarios, and kind of just do the whole thing here. So this is where things are going to start to get a little bit more fun. So let's go over to the next section. We're going to define our parameters. So this is going to get technical, folks. This is going to be pretty technical. And so essentially you have a couple of different ways to define your parameters, but for all your test cases, right, in order for the application to help you out, you're going to go in and define these different parameters and then the values. And so Xray is then going to take this information and make your tests. And you can have some variations, right? You're going to have like environmental variations, user variations, usage variations. You get to define however you want. And there's a bunch of different options that you have. There's this good book that they're promoting where you can find like just different paths and techniques that you have for testing. So if you're not a tester, you might not be as excited, but if you're a tester, you're probably very excited about that. And remember, deciding what to include as parameters and values in your test case designer model will be the most important part of the entire test design process. So being able to identify the best parameters will determine the effectiveness of your test model. And so this is the part that's also very interesting to me because we spend so much time in the software development world and sprints are very optimized for software development. But this is a key component and a key critical part of the entire lifecycle here of the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, and testing plays a critical role. But I don't think enough people like focus on it during sprint planning. So it's interesting that since there's so much more science to this, like you should be investing some time and energy and effort into doing this a little bit better. All right, so we got to decide which ideas to include in our models and then decide how to include those selected ideas in our models. And selecting the best parameters for your models, right? So parameters that don't impact the system, parameters that obviously will impact the system, and then parameters that are likely to have an impact. So anything that won't impact the system, assuming you want to generate a set of positive tests to confirm that the application works as it should, you can safely omit parameters that from the model of a new system under test. And so we can just not include things. Assuming you want to generate a set of positive tests to confirm that the application works, you can quickly include more obvious and straightforward testing ideas. And then do the risky, less impactful, but less obvious ones as well. So when selecting the best parameters for your test model, only focus on your system inputs. Do not include outcomes as expected results. Once you get more experience with TCD, we have tips for handling those two aspects. So you're going to want to determine your values. So your next step is to determine the variations of your parameters. You're going to need to select how they vary and which are the most relevant. And the parameters can vary as descriptive number of range values. Defining values example. So this is kind of like, hey, here's some food for thought, if you will. If you're trying to test everything, right? Test number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you test a 1 or a 5 or a 10 or 11, it's all the same result, most likely. However, if you test like a 1 and then you test a couple of them and then many, then you might have 3 different scenarios. But the most effective is to have like a range of values, right? Where you have the 1, the 2 to the 5, the 6 to the 10, and you're going to find more specific testing that way, because testing just 1, then 2 through 5, then 6 through 10, like as a range, it's going to yield you the same result. So you only have to do 3 tests as opposed to like 11 tests. If your model includes a long list of values, you are in the danger of generating way more tests than needed. So the value expansion feature can dramatically reduce the number of tests generated in those situations. Ways to define parameters and values. So once you have thought about what you want to include in your model and how the parameters screen to the TCD offers 2 modes to accomplish this. So the standard view allows you to edit parameters one by one, and then the bulk view allows you to just do a whole bunch at the same time. You can also import files to test models from Excel or from this mind map, which I've never even heard of. All right, so now we're going to go into a video, and we're going to basically see how to do this inside of Jira. So going full screen here, we're going to go to our create a new test model. You're going to give the new test model a name. Once you have given it a name, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. We're going to create it, and then we're going to add a parameter. And remember, there's 2 ways to create your parameters. We can just define the parameter with its values, like whatever values we want to include in there. And you just go through and you make a bunch of different parameters. These are all going to be all the things that are going to guide our testing. And you just keep adding parameters until you define all your different parameters. Or you can do it in bulk, where you're going to be able to like define, using this pseudocode here, a parameter with a bunch of values in there. And it's just a little bit more easier and intuitive to do it this way, I think. Next up, specify system rules. So rules allow us to apply some restrictions, as we may not be interested in having all the combination of variables. And we're going to have 2 things to look at: our constraints and our forced interactions. So constraints are going to be things that can't happen, whether they're invalid, like you're never going to go from India to India, or whether they're bound, right? So like you have to, if you're flying United, you can only choose business, right? So like 2 things need to happen together. And all of these kind of get interesting, right? But there's a bunch of different like ways to do this where you don't want to, let me rephrase that. There's different ways for you to think about how to pair or create the rules. One path is to look at it from this visual way, where you have path 1, pair 2, or parameter 1, parameter 2, and you say A and D can never exist, right? Because it's just part of your nature of like, you don't want that to happen. Or you can say like A can happen with D, like those 2 have to happen, right? And then A can never happen with E or F. So you can do a combination of both. I like this right-hand side though, because this right-hand side kind of gives you a more better, like easier to read example of what's going on here. Then you can do mutually exclusive, right? So business class is exclusive to flights in the US, and there are no other class options for this. We also have an advanced constraint editor where you can implement constraints via the click method on the standard editor or the syntax method in the advanced one. So in the bulk one, you can kind of see the different relationships. And now let's talk about forced interactions. So the goal of forced interactions, as opposed to the constraints, is to identify value combinations that should be included in the scenario suite. So why do we need a specific inclusion? So for example, a 2-way set of tests, test case designer's algorithm guarantees that all pairs of values will appear in at least one test. However, sometimes there are critical requirements which always include 1 and 2 values, Instead of increasing the coverage strength from 3-way to 4-way interactions, we can use forced interactions to surgically manage the scenario suite. So now let's watch a video on setting up those constraints. Oh, the little audio here. All right, so there's a section in your test plan where for the constraints, and you're just gonna be able to come in here and you can just set whether it's a constraint that can happen. So you put the X, or you can use the other option there, the green one, where it's the bound one. And so you get to choose, and it's very easy, very intuitive, and you just go through every single one. So that way when you do use Xray to auto create those tests for you, it's gonna just know the logic and the conditions that things can or may not need to happen. It just makes things a little bit easier for you. And so it's definitely cool. And I think like if I was an enterprise customer with Xray, like this would be something I would definitely want. So I would definitely be buying Xray Enterprise. So scenarios represent the combinations of parameter values. Each row is unique. There is never redundancy in the generated data table unless you intentionally force it. And so understanding the strength of combination. So the number of rows in your scenario table is determined in large part by the coverage setting. So you can select the strength by deciding which type of interaction you want. While we provide the one-way interaction option, we do not recommend it based on the nature of the defect triggers we discussed earlier. The primary use case for it is when TCD is leveraged only for scripting efficiency. So testing every pair of parameter values in two-way interactions. So for the statistically best bang for your buck, you should test every pair of parameter values in your system at least once. In the first 3 out of 11 scenarios, we can see example pair highlighted and the left being covered. Testing every triplet of values, a 3-way interaction. If you are more worried about the quality than the efficiency, you should test every triplet of parameters values in your system at least once. So test case design can actually go all the way to covering 6-way interactions in its scenarios, although we hear only NASA uses that. All right, let's go watch a video where we're gonna go walk through scenarios next. Some problem does not let me get to the mute button quick enough. All right, there's risks with one-way scenarios, so probably don't do that. Hit the drop down and change to a minimum 2-way. It looks like Xray wants you to do 2-way, but as you can see, there's 2-way, 3-ways, and then mix where you can go. And so, as you can see, this is going to create 16 scenarios for us, and it's just possible. It just does all the possibilities because we've already set up the parameters with those values, and we've already put any rules that were in place. So now we're just saying, okay, so this is what I need you to test. I need you to test this with that, this with this other one. And it just goes and does it automatically. So it saves you a lot of the guesswork after you've done your parameters, after that you've put the values, and after you put the rules, then you can just have Xray do the magic for you. You can also freeze scenarios to ensure that specific value combinations do not change when you're updating your model. So if you do that, the entire scenario table will be saved as a forced interaction. So freezing scenarios is usually not desirable as it will likely result in less efficiency counts as your test model evolves. Freezing should only be done if there's an important reason to preserve these exact combinations and should be typically done or undone before the next major model iteration. Give me 1 second, folks. Okay, now let's talk about analyzing Xray test coverage. Xray Test Case Designer provides 2 different visualizations to understand interaction coverage of your scenarios. You have a coverage matrix and a coverage graph. So the coverage matrix enables you to see the aggregate pairwise coverage achieved during a running certain number of tests. It helps answer how much testing is enough for my project. You can also determine whether or not certain interactions have been covered yet in a given subset. All of this is possible thanks to the coverage matrix. So take a look at it inside of our test models. You can hover over any square on the tip. So I don't think that this was in the cloud one, but basically it's going to give you a coverage, right? So you're going to know how many value pairs have been covered, how many have not, and then any of the black ones have constraints. We then have the coverage graph, which is going to basically be the same thing, but it shows the aggregate coverage percentage for any interaction string. So after running the first 12 tests, we will see 80.9 in the three-way coverage. That's interesting. All right, we're going to move over to creating scripts. Again, I don't remember doing this one in the cloud. So scripts provide the ability to define actions and expected results in a data-driven template manner. They can be applicable to either manual or automated test. In the manual section, Test Case Designer includes the functionality to add steps and expected results that connect with the optimized data table. So you would write the content as you typically do, except step syntax is data-driven. In the flying to text box, flying to with parameter name value, changing from the rest. Okay, I do remember this, folks. Until you go and try it yourself, this is just going to go way over your head. So I wish that there was more examples that we can see in videos. I think that would really, really help. Expected results. Okay, so only one manual script template is created per model. Upon export, it will automatically generate as many test cases as you had rows on your scenarios. So how to create the script for automated execution. In the automated section, Test Case Designer includes the functionality to create behavioral data-driven scripts so that even non-coders can accelerate the automation process. It is a smart gherkin given when then feature file editor that. Oh, and it looks like this is like built in. Yeah, it looks like it's built in. So it leverages both the Test Case Designer model elements and the gherkin script syntax. So it makes it easier for testers to write consistent data-driven scripts using autocomplete with parameter names. And then it automatically generates comprehensive data tables and or gherkin steps in one-to-many scripting scenarios. So it's kind of cool. And now we integrate with Xray. So once the scenarios, once the optimized scenario scripts have been created inside the Test Case Designer, users can sync the optimized tests with Xray Enterprise for test management. The Xray API is used to seamlessly integrate two capabilities. Once you're ready, simply navigate to the synchronization capability. In order for the syncing to occur, you must connect to Jira and use your Jira login credentials. Important, when synchronizing, you have two options for manual or automated. So if you have created manual steps, under scripts capability, be sure that those scripts on the dropdown are synchronized. And if you've created the gherkin steps to automate, be sure you select that option. If the sync option experiences difficulties, you can download the file from export Xray dialog and then manually import it into Xray. There are several other export options with Test Case Designer. As you can see on the right, these downloaded artifacts will not be used in Xray, but feel free to explore them. Good to know you have options. Now let's talk about versioning. This is an Xray exclusive feature, and actually one of the reasons why I've had a team in the past actually want to buy Xray for this very use case here. So test case versioning was one of the most requested features for Xray, and it's now available at the enterprise because, money. You can create new versions of the same test, allowing you to create a baseline for your test case, mark specific milestones, view all the previous test versions and revert them to a particular version, and have multiple versions active and execute them independently, and set versions as default when it's not the most recent version. So you need to go into the Xray section, create a new version, and then you have a new version. So when you create a new version, Xray will automatically generate the same based on the latest version, and you can always rename it later. All right. These little pop-ups make it really hard. Setting the default version. Wow, this is interesting. So enforce a version as the default version. The default version, there's an option here, but the default version is the most recent version. But if you choose, you can force any version to be considered the default one. So the default version is the one Xray chooses when the Xray when you create a test run for the test without explicitly specifying a version. If you want to execute a specific version, you can select the version at the new test execution. You can also add a version to an existing test execution. And you can view and manage your test case versions, very similar to versions inside of Jira, but a little bit differently. All changes related to the test specification can be viewed at the issue activity. Xray adds a new test history tab that enables you to see and filter all changes by test version. Again, you don't get this if you're just using the regular Xray, so this is why you got to go and pay extra for Xray Enterprise. Now we're going to shift gears. We're going to move over to dynamic test plans. So test plans enable you to have better visibility and management over your tests. With Xray Enterprise, you can create static test plans. This means you need to explicitly add and update your tests to the test plan. Or you can have dynamic test plans where Xray adds and updates your tests into the test plan based on conditions you define. A dynamic test plan is a test plan that is because it's using a filter to collect all the test cases, is always up to date. So with dynamic test plans, we take advantage of the power of JQL. Xray is seamlessly integrated with Jira, so you can add custom fields to your tests and later catch them into your JQL filter. So why use a dynamic test plan? So imagine this scenario. Bart is a tester, and he needs to make sure that all user stories planned at sprint 1 are covered and tested, but at this moment, he has not created all the manual test cases. Bart knows that all tests linked with the user stories plan for sprint 1 need to be a part of his test plan, so he can create a dynamic test plan. So by having a filter prepared to collect all the tests for sprint 1, Bart just needs to focus on creating the test cases. So he's just going to create a JQ, and I think we're going to go watch that in a video in a little bit, where we see how this actually ends up working. All right, so we have some examples here. So for example, he can create a filter where like we're looking for sprint equals number 1 in this particular project, and then it's going to pull any tests, right? The key part here is that it's going to use or reference any tests. It's not specific to issue type at this point. It's just going to bring whatever tests are within the bounds of this JQL. So it makes it a little bit simpler. So for example, if I bring in the whole project, I don't have to call out and specify that I just want the test, because it's just the dynamic test is only going to add tests that are available in that particular project. So it's a little, I don't know if I want to say smart from that perspective. I don't think that's the right word, but it's definitely trying to do something intelligent. All right, here we go. We're going to play this video. I always got to mute this thing. And so here you can see that we have a bunch of tests, and we're going to go create a test plan, and we're going to give it a name. All right, and as we give it a name, this is for specifically for sprint 1, but we're going to go pull in our filter so it knows where to go find the tests. And so when we do that, it's just going to find every test that's in this sprint 1, and that's it. Like there's nothing magical that you need to do or anything extra. Like all the tests are automatically going to be pulled in a second. As you can see, we have 19 of them to do, and this is just because it went and found that there was 19 tests that were in relation to sprint 1. So nothing like over the top magical, but still convenient is what I'll probably use the word convenient. Now we're switching gears to cross-project reports for Xray Enterprise. So how to get the most out of your cross-project reports. So with cross-project reports capability, you can now use Xray reports with data from different projects. But when do you need cross-project reports, and what is relevant in these types of reports? So imagine that you have an umbrella with multiple sub-projects that are combined to provide a solution, or that you're delivering a feature that is shared amongst different projects. So questions that are going to pop up: how are all my deliverables in this multi-project? Are they ready to be delivered? Is there requirement coverage being increased or not in these projects over a period of time? What is the progress of the test plans? What is the progress of each test execution? Right. So a lot of important questions that we're going to ask ourselves. And so in the next slide, we're going to find out how we get to answer those questions. So we can look at our overall requirement coverage report. So we may have an umbrella and multiple sub-projects that are combined to provide a solution. We aim to answer, how are all my deliverables of this multi-project? Are they to be delivered? Or we may have an umbrella with multiple sub-projects that are combined to provide a solution, and all these projects share the same release terminology. Eventually, they move at the same pace. So we aim to answer, how are all my deliverables of this multi-project for release XPTO? Are they ready to be delivered? The overall requirement coverage report. So analyze the coverage status of requirements of multiple projects at the same time. Analyze the coverage status of requirements of multiple projects at the same time. And analyze the coverage. Okay, how are these different? Multiple projects at the same time. Oh, having in mind the latest testing results and having in mind common shared release. Okay, folks, when we take the test, it's going to come and bite us in the butt. And then we can analyze the coverage status of requirements grouped by component, priority, and so on. So there's a couple limitations with the overall requirement coverage report is that it's unable to analyze a combination of multiple projects on different project levels. Imagine a solution that is composed of project A, version 1 component, okay. And it's unable to group deliverables. Let's go look at the overall report here. Got unmuted, of course. All right, so we are in an active sprint and we see our coverage here. And we're going to go to our Xray reports. We're going to define our scope, pick the project that we want, and pick the version that we want and hit apply. So it's going to bring back a report based on that specific scope. And I'm not sure what it's doing now. All I can see is that 50% of them are passed and 50% are not okay. Now we're in a different space or project. We're going to go to the X report here. We're going to change it to, I'm assuming, yeah, be that bookstore one. Leave the same version. So basically we were looking at work across two different versions. And this one's going to show us a different result because it just passed differently. I'm not sure what it was doing here. I don't remember this part being in the cloud one. I would have remembered watching this video. But now if we bring them both together, yeah, it's all just clumped up together. Cool. I guess all this was trying to tell us is that you can show two individual reports or you can pull in all the work into one report. So it's all conveniently there, I guess. If I had to guess why we just spent 2 minutes looking at that. Historical requirement coverage report. So we may be delivering, I wish these things disappeared faster. So we may be delivering a cross-project feature or have an umbrella project with multiple sub-projects to provide a solution and want to have an overview of how the requirement coverage has evolved in each project for a given time. Hello, Mr. Fergus. How are you? So for a historical requirement coverage report, there's 3 possibilities. We're going to analyze the historical data over a period of time, coverage, status of requirements of multiple projects at the same time, having in mind the latest testing results. And then we can do the same thing, but only having in mind the common shared release. And then we can analyze group by component at the same time. And so the same limitation. So now let's go look at a video on how to do this one. And you're gone, Mr. Fergus. All right, let's mute that. So we're going to go to our Xray report for this particular project. We're going to switch to our historical one. And here, it's basically going to be a lot of the same thing that we just saw, right? You can pick a specific project and group by that specific fixed version, or you can pull in multiple projects, I'm assuming. It didn't show us. This one was very quick. The traceability report. We may be delivering a cross-project feature, or okay, this is all like the same. We need to be able to trace backwards and forward the issues in the projects. With the cross-project capability added to the traceability report, we're able to see in one integrated view how the issues are connected all across. So the traceability is going to analyze the provenance of each issue in multiple projects, allows you to know that, for example, that bug X was found in test execution E of the test T that is covering requirement R of project P. That is not easy to read 10 times fast. It allows you to evaluate the requirement of status for a given version and see all linked open defects across the projects, and allows you to analyze the requirement and related executions. Of course, some limitations as well that are all the same. Now let's go look at a video here. All right, gotta mute this thing. Let's see what we're doing here. We're going into our reports. We're going to switch reports to our traceability report. Yeah, see, I don't think any of this was covered in the last test. Where we got our component, we got our fixed version, we got our project. We're going to hit apply. We're going to generate that report. And I guess we just see what we need to see there. I'm not seeing what the heck this thing is doing. All I know is that it's showing me stuff. But I don't know that the stuff that it's showing me is of any value. Okay. I'm going to fast forward through this one. Just generate the traceability and play with it. That's all I can tell you. We now have a test plan report. Let's just see how to actually use it, because these reports, they're automatically generated and they're not telling me what they're doing in these videos. Like, I wish there was some closed captioning or something, but all right, we're going to go to Xray. We're now going to go to the test plan one, and you're going to define your version, your project, whatever you want here, hit apply, generate the report. And this is just going to give you the test plans that were in that project, how many were in progress, a lot of the cool data there. So awesome. We're going to go to a different project now, do the same thing, but now we're changing the scope. We're generated, and this one's going to be slightly different. It's going to show us a test plan for this particular project. Groundbreaking. Then we have a text execution report. And I'm assuming it's a lot of the same, folks. We're going to go into Xray, go to the reports. This time we're doing the text execution, pick your scope, and then you're going to see the report of all the executions that ran. I don't know how these are any different than what was in the regular version of Jira or Xray. And so I'm not sure why we're spending time on it here, but we are. And then we have a test run report. So now let's go look at what that one looks like. So the test run, again, we go into the Xray, we go to the final report, the test run one, pick your scope, and then you will see which ones passed and which ones failed. We can switch projects, pick your scope again, and then again, you'll get the status of those things to see which one passed or which one failed. And then we can filter and pull everything into one view. And so that makes it more convenient. No, start the survey. Do we have to take a test on this one? All right. Videos should, I can't spell. Some CC to help follow along. Need more videos. Congratulations, we're done. Yay. And we did not have to take a test on this one. Awesome. Complete the unit. Let's get our paper for our boss. Yes. All right, folks, that is it then. We're going to come back tomorrow and hit up Xray Enterprise for Data Center Test Case Designer Advanced Example. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and we'll see you all in the next stream. Bye, everybody.